You found it. It's The Real News with your host, David Knight.
Welcome back. I'm David Knight, and our guest now is Steve Quayle. Glad to have Steve Quayle on here. He's one of the original founders of the Prepper Movement. He's been a talk show host now for over 20 years. He's got a conference that's coming up that I'm going to be a part of. We want to talk about that, a conference on transhumanism. But as we look at current events, and as we look at what is happening with Facebook, for example, people on the left seem to have just now started to care. We had all the Snowden revelations. They didn't care about that. They didn't care about the NSA because they trust government. And we have scientists and technology that they trust. As a matter of fact, I think the technology is really the golden idol of our age. And the promise that comes with it is that you will live forever and that you will become like God. That is the promise behind transhumanism, behind the things that we've been told by people like Ray Kurzweil. Wrote a book, The Spiritual Machine. That was one of his first books. Then he talked about the singularity, where we're going to merge with this omnipresent, all-knowing, all-powerful God of technology. And it has now become omnipotent. You've got China, where they can watch everybody, everything that everyone is doing. And of course, Facebook has been doing this. I'm glad that people are starting to wake up to this. It took them the realization on the left. Some people on the right woke up about this, but not enough. Virtually nobody on the left was really complaining about this until they realized, oh, maybe Trump used this. Well, of course, Obama was using it massively. But now there is a move for people to talk about this. There still isn't any. They want to delete Facebook, but they don't want to delete the privacy attack. So joining us now is Steve Quayle. You can find him truelegendstheseries.com and stevequayle.com. And tell us, Steve, where they can go to sign up for the upcoming conference.
Well, David, first of all, thank you for being one of the keynote speakers. And ladies and gentlemen, we're going to have a conference in Branson. This will be the second year, called Transhumanism in the Hybrid Age. And David Knight will be the key speaker Friday night. And we're going to have 8 different speakers. And one of the speakers, David, is Hugo de Garis, who you have interviewed. And it's so late in the game. So this is going to be on from September 14th through the 16th. It will sell out fast, ladies and gentlemen. So there are other venues going on in Branson. So we encourage you to go on stevequayle.com, click on the banner that's True Legends, and you can get your admission ticket there. And we had people from all over the world, David, and 145 nations were listening or downloading the program when it was going on. So I'm excited. There's never been a conference like this, and it's not, there's no hype involved in that statement. Because as you know, transhumanism in the hybrid age, it's probably the most critical issue facing our day. Francis Fukuyama, who is basically a futurist, when asked, what's the most dangerous event happening on the hybrid age, or excuse me, happening to the world that means pretty much the end of mankind, he said transhumanism. So you brought up Ray Kurzweil. And you know,
well, let's talk a little bit about that with Hugo de Garis, because I find him to be a very fascinating figure. He has the same idea that this is the event that could cause the destruction of mankind. And yet, as a scientist who's been in this field, he is drawn to creating what he thinks is going to be the monster that destroys him. He's written a book about it called The Artilect War, where he says, hey, people are going to start waking up to this, and we're going to have a few, the small number of technocratic elite like Jeff Bezos are going to flee the surface of the planet. He calls them cosmists. He says they'll flee the surface of the planet, kind of like we saw in the movie Elysium. And they will continue their development as people wake up to this and say, we don't want what you're pushing on us. They will flee, continue this, and then they will go to war with the people who remain on Earth that he calls the Terrans. And he says it will result in giga death because they will have so much technical capability. So he looks at all of this, and he even believes that the time frame is accelerating and coming closer to what Ray Kurzweil has said, 2030 to 2040. And I know people don't think that's going to happen, but I would suggest to people, think about how your communication has fundamentally changed since the year 2000. And how you didn't have any cell phones. It wasn't ubiquitous then. Now we all look in that black mirror and it dominates everything in our life, and they watch and control everything that we do. And they're talking about something that is as big, if not bigger, transformation coming up in the next 12 to 22 years.
I think it's accelerated. Even Jesus said, if the days weren't shortened for the elect's sake, there'd be no flesh left alive. And David, when I wrote Genetic Armageddon years ago, Today's Technology, Tomorrow's Monsters, and then Xenogenesis, which is, in my opinion, one of the most thought-provoking books I've ever written. It's available from InfoWars, your store. It's critical that people understand that where they think this is at, it's literally, in my opinion, based on multiple scientists and black ops individuals, it's literally 1,000 years advanced from what we know.
That's right.
We used to think that Star Trek terraforming planets was just off the charts. We used to think that, the Borg, and in essence, Facebook and Google together have become Skynet. And as you and I were talking briefly, with the Chinese admission now that they can monitor 3 billion faces in under a second, there is literally a net across the earth. There is a, if you will, I love Prison Planet, but I don't think people understand how descriptive that title is, because
yes.
and even in one thing, and I think people have got to understand, in Obadiah, which is an Old Testament prophet, there's only 24 verses, but verse 4 says, God speaking, though you set your nest, N-E-S-T, amongst the stars, yet will I bring you down. And 5G is already planning on putting transmitters and an antenna array on the moon, because they don't have to deal with too much heat, because obviously the moon is cold. So NEST, and I thought about that acronym, it's never-ending surveillance technology. And that's what Alex has been warning about, and I've been warning about.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. It is an omniscient, all-powerful, all-knowing God that they are creating here, a false God, and they are worshiping this. And the people who worship it, like Ray Kurzweil, one of the things he said in terms of talking about the time frame coming in, one of the arguments that he makes whenever he talks to the Council on Foreign Relations or South by Southwest or Davos or whatever, he always talks about the Human Genome Project. And he said, when we got to the first 1%, everybody said, look at how long it's taken you to get to this. You'll never get there at this rate. And he said, well, it's been accelerating at an exponential rate. And he said, all information science, kind of like Moore's Law, when we talk about the power of processors, microcomputers, how they double over a certain period of time. He said that's been at an increasing rate. So he said, I looked at this and I said, well, we'll be done in only 7 years. We're nearly there now after getting the first 1%. And he said, it turned out we were right. They sequenced the human genome in the next 7 years. And so he's looking at this and he's sticking to his time frame of 2030. And I'm looking at some of the things that are so disruptive in terms of the 5G in our cities, the smart cities, and the self-driving cars, how that's going to disrupt our economy, put people out of work. They're already looking at how they can control us because they say, hey, look, the proletariat, because these people have a Marxist, evolutionist, Leninist perspective. They say the proletariat are now the precariat because they're in a precarious position to us, and we've got to do something to placate them. We're going to put them on an allowance, call it universal basic income. This is coming on very quickly, and I don't think people realize just how quickly it's coming on us. And we have a break that is coming up quickly on us, but we're going to be right back, and I'm going to turn the mic over to Steve Quayle to talk about transhumanism when we return. We'll be right back. Welcome back. I'm David Knight, and we're talking to Steve Quayle. You can find him at stevequayle.com. I was just looking at his bio sheet here. He was the only person 20 years ago saying that China was going to back their currency with gold. They did that this last Monday, March 26th. They have gone in the opposite direction of the United States. When we abandoned gold and we created the petrodollar, now China and Russia want to take down that petrocurrency. That's going to cause a financial meltdown here in the United States as they destroy our ability to borrow money without any consequences. And he was predicting that 20 years ago. But I want to get back to Facebook and into transhumanism as well. We've been talking about Facebook. We've been talking about how people are waking up to the fact that it's now dangerous. But they've been able to get people to voluntarily surrender their privacy for a fundamental human flaw by appealing to a defect in our human nature. And what is that defect, Steve?
Personal vanity, David. And when
Exactly.
it first came, when it first came
You said
out,
that during the break, and I said, we got to talk about that. It's personal vanity. That's how they got our privacy. They just owned us on this.
And look at this. It's interesting because when you talk about Facebook, and now in light of the Chinese announcement, it could really be, and by the way, I called it back in those days when I first started warning about it, Faces of Death book, okay? Faces of Death book.
Right.
Now, that may sound a little harsh, but I think, David, people need a reality shakeup right now in such a way because it's really become a self-erecting intelligence dossier. When Alex and I both started warning about Marcus Wolf, the head of the East German Stasi, being hired by the United States government and FEMA to have basically homeland security and also to set up the greatest spy network the world has ever known, it's obviously in play. And Google has become Skynet. And
Yes.
with all of the Terminator robots and everything that's going on, we've seen every form of robot now being produced. Now, this is all important to Facebook because remember, with the technology that they can basically identify you or I in a coliseum of 50,000 people by our thermal image, by our specific genetic makeup. And by the way, I believe the human genome went way beyond just the human genome. I believe that they have a very, very sinister ulterior motive. But you said, David, their goal is to be like God. And basically, this, Zoltan Isvan said, all transhumanists basically don't want to die. Ye shall be as God. Ye shall not die. So the intelligence-directed dossiers that people have built on themselves, and by the way, I'm on record. I think Edward Snowden should be given the Nobel Peace Prize. And I'm serious about this. And I think, ladies and gentlemen, you need to write the Nobel Commission. And here's why. He has done more, or actually he and Julian Assange have done more to, I would say, preemptively define the killing, the higher form of killing that's going to be coming on the planet. Look, the book of Revelation talks about 2/3 of the world's population dying. The Deagle report, which Alex and I covered, you covered it. How can the United States go from a population of 300 million to slightly over 50, 60 million in the next 7 years? Hello, everyone. And the personal vanity, who invented the selfie? Pretty much, I want to make it clear, it was a porn star, I mean, if it wasn't the hi, look at me having sex with my boyfriend videos out there, on who was it, Kardashians and others, Kim Kardashian, Paris Hilton. Look, that's a matter, that's not slander, that's not libel. In my opinion, that's what launched the whole selfie movement. Now, fast forward, we're talking right now about people saying 2025, 2035. When Kurzweil wrote his book on the spiritual machines, I was on record 20 years ago, David, and I'm saying this not to say whoopee for me, but to tell people, if 20 years ago I was telling you that machines, mechanical devices would become demon-possessed, hello, spiritual machines.
That's right.
We're talking now, the Vatican says they've got, requests for 500,000 exorcisms. And judging from my email, I could add 1,000 more to that. But the point is that we're in a time now where you're getting I would say, the differentiation between the spiritual world and the physical world, and they're blending. Same thing with CERN. We started warning about CERN. We started warning about, listen, beyond all the, I would say this, the polite BS of that, CERN is trying to open dimensions. The God particle, they actually want, and they actually believe in their deception that they will be able to make war against God. And, when you've got the god Shiva, little g, Shiva, the cosmic destroyer, then this, that Oppenheimer, who was, one of the inventors of the atomic bomb, basically quotes that statement that he has become the destroyer of worlds. So I'm telling you this, Faces of Death book, in my opinion, Google, and by the way, the word Google, most people don't know that, that's a number that's pretty much got an infinite amount of zeros after it. So when you take nest, though you set your nest amongst the stars, that's kind of it was a revelation to me this morning, by the way, never-ending surveillance technology. And you say, what next can they have? Monitoring our brainwave. When I interviewed Frank Dukes a number of years ago, wrote the book The Secret Man. He was Bill Casey's kind of henchman for the CIA. He told me then, David, that they can, by thermal imaging, pick your thermal imaging off or my thermal imaging off, and it's relatively easy. When you see the crummy pictures of Mars by NASA and JPL, Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and you see the crummy pictures that they allow you to see in satellite surveillance, I'm telling you this, they have something that's almost infinite resolution. So when you combine infinite resolution with artificial intelligence, and they're brain mapping, but they're friend mapping too. And when Edward Snowden brought that out, and by the way, I recommend everybody go and see Snowden, the movie. It is that important. They have basically given to the whole world, the idea is that everything you think, do, and say is just a click away. And so, David, this is so critical. I believe this, and I'll say this. I've written 10, 11 books. The most important thing I know of, the most important thing at this point, I don't know of anything more important, is transhumanism, the hybrid age. And by the way, people can go to GENSIX.com, gen6.com, to know where to get their tickets and to read your bio, read my bio, and see what's going to be coming up. Gen6, GENSIX.com. So if somebody said, okay, Steve, you've been on talk radio 25 years, 30 as a guest, but the point is, where are you at now at this point in your life? I'm saying this. There's nothing more that I can take people to beyond the absolute implementation of what the Bible calls the Great Tribulation. And the beast, whether you call it the battlefield engagement and systems technology, all of the different acronyms, they're here now. So I challenge that it's 2025 through 2035. I think it's accelerating at such a pace. We look at the persecution of Christians. We look at the absolute slander of the Lord Jesus Christ. And by the way, Paul the Apostle, that movie, I put the trailer up on my website. People need to see that. And I believe Jim Caviezel has given one of the most powerful witnesses in talking about Paul. He's a remarkable man and a remarkable man of God. And
I'm anxious to see that. I'm going to see that this weekend. I saw I Can Only Believe last weekend, and that was a really well-produced film. Anybody would enjoy that. You don't have to be a Christian to enjoy that.
Yeah, it's
and you don't have to. You don't feel like you got to take a shower when you come out of it either. But it doesn't sacrifice anything in terms of entertainment or drama or connection to the characters at all. It's just that you don't feel disgusted. We're talking about transhumanism. I'll just throw this in before we go to the break, Steve. I've got an article here coming from a Jesuit-run college where this called Holy Cross, and this theology professor says Jesus was a drag queen with queer desires. This is how perverted and how distant we have become, disconnected from our culture, disconnected from our heritage, our history, our faith. And the thing that is coming at us now is transhumanism. We'll be right back with Steve Quayle. Stay with us. Welcome back. I'm David Knight, and we're talking to Steve Quayle, stevequayle.com. We'll talk a little bit more about transhumanism. There's a conference coming up in September. You can get the link to that at stevequayle.com. Steve, when we look at what is happening here, I think one of the great ironies of all this is that we have these people who are pushing us, like Ray Kurzweil and others, evolutionists, materialists. They look at man simply as a machine. And they feel that if they can replicate this machine accurately enough, that it'll somehow come to life. It's kind of a naive thing to some degree, kind of like the Frankenstein idea. When they discovered electricity, they could say, hey, look, if we apply this electricity to a frog, we can make the arm jump. So therefore, we should be able to reanimate a human corpse. But the fundamental flaw in what they're doing, not that this is not a very dangerous thing that is coming, but when they come at it from this evolutionary standpoint, they were simply complex machines. They've got all the king's men and all the king's money and all the king's scientists and spending hundreds of billions of dollars trying to figure out the brain. And because it is so incredibly complex, but they think that it just happened by random chance, like a tornado in a junkyard built this incredibly complex machine and everything about them that is so complex that they're trying to duplicate. That, to me, is the fundamental foolishness about this. But it is a very serious effort, and it is very dangerous, and it is going to get very dangerous in a very short time. I don't think people realize just how quickly autonomous killing machines, killing swarms of drones, as my son says, nothing good ever comes from a swarm of anything, especially when it's autonomous killing machines. People don't understand just how rapidly a lot of this technology is being used, how it has been pushed by DARPA, how it has been purchased by Google, and how all of this stuff is coming together on all these multiple fronts.
Well, first of all, David, it is all coming together. It is all controlled by the same commander-in-chief. His name is Satan. We're in a battle for the seed of humanity. with all of the new biological processes taking place out of the womb, with obviously women, even the women's movement is alienating women and men, biological reproduction. And one of the things that was hardest for people to grasp is the whole robotic sex thing. Now, obviously, getting beyond the sensationalism of sex with machine, there's a greater issue at play here, David, because again, the devil is doing his best, and his goal is to destroy every last man, woman, and child. I'm sorry, I'm pounding the desk there. But the point is that he will not succeed. But Jesus said, and you made reference to this, if he didn't shorten the days, there'd be no flesh left alive. That word flesh is interesting because, again, when you're talking about demon-possessed machines, and people thought, well, you know, who wants to have sex with the female version of the Tin Woman? It's gone way beyond that. And so what's problematic now, again, in the book of Isaiah, here's something you probably never thought of, is that in the book of Isaiah, one of the oldest prophets in the Old Testament, the 4th chapter talks about in those days, I believe that's these days, 7 women will take hold of one man saying, take our reproach away. In the context that that's written, the reproach was being childless, husbandless, and no one to look after you. So even the basis of the family obviously has gone into total destruction 50 years ago. But I think that people have got to understand this, is that technology is so far beyond what you know. David mentioned DARPA, Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, the super soldier. Can you imagine? People used to laugh at that, and now what is Hollywood filled with? Superheroes. In other words, you got to be something better than you are, and that's the lie.
It's predictive programming, isn't it?
It is
showing these mutants, these superheroes, and so forth. Just like I think they did with Facebook. You know, they started out by feeding that vanity that you were talking about with Facebook, that fundamental flaw of human nature. They started feeding that with a program called Big Brother. How obvious! Where you have these ordinary people, and because they're under 24-hour surveillance, they become celebrities. And so everybody looks at this and is like, well, I could become a celebrity if I reproduce that in my little Facebook page. I'll put everything about my life out there, and I'll reproduce Big Brother. Yeah, well, you reproduce the Orwellian aspect of Big Brother. You just don't realize it yet.
A desperate cry for identity and validation. And this is what's interesting because, again, look at the whole world of virtual reality. Look at the world of avatars. Avatar is obviously a make-believe entity that you assume its identity, and you go into a virtual world. That's how the intelligence agencies have been able to basically brainwash the youth of our day. And look, I'm frustrated that people cannot see the programming. It was Bill Casey who said, you know this, that I will know that our successes, that we've been successful when everything the American people believe is a lie. When we warned on talk radio, when we warned.
And that was Reagan's guy.
You got it.
One of the founders of the CIA, and a guy that helped get Reagan in and kept him in there. Bill Casey.
Casey was murdered, by the way. He had plutonium needle in the visor of his car. He got brain chemistry, so they got rid of him too. So what's critical for people, and Twitter, a little birdie told me so, what is happening now with all social media, it has produced the Borg of Star Trek. And people commit suicide when they are, what is it called, unfriended? Or what if you're a little Twitter, somebody shoots you with a shotgun? I don't know. I'm not on Twitter. So the point that I'm trying to make is this. The very uniqueness of each individual that God has created is now being put into a hodgepodge of the Borg, cyborg, cybernetic creation. DARPA is looking at super soldiers. And even in Genetic Armageddon, I talked about the Hercules gene, a little lady, a little young girl in Ukraine, I forget her name, but this is 20 years ago, that she could lift like 900 pounds, and she's a 90-pound woman. Or the BBC brought out the chip. One of the very first chips that they were looking at being able to define as man was called Soul Catcher, S-O-U-L Catcher. So they're in plain sight, David. Everything they're doing is in plain sight. And I tell people, however many years they say it's going to take to get here, divide it by 3 at least. So if they say it's going to take 30 years, it's going to take 10. And again, We've seen so many, we've gone beyond the way of beyond implants. We've got smart dust, and we've got individually defined their goal. And I've been told this by an insider is to literally spray the planet with nanoparticles and be able to account for every animal, every plant, every hybrid. And it's interesting because I write about ancient history, and I write about prior even to the creation of Adam and Eve. People get controversial, think that's controversial, but the great civilizations of the world were destroyed when they started messing around with human genomes. And people don't understand this. This is not old. When I write about ancient mythology, mythological creatures, and even the skeletal finds, the greatest cover-up of history is a cover-over of history. So again, Gen6, GENSIX.com. I think people's minds will be blown because, again, Hugo de Garis will be there, and Hugo will be laying out where this is. And even those who now even not Kurzweil, but Elon Musk and others who are warning about, if you will, the robot takeover, what do we have? We have cannibal robots. The military's got basically robots. That'll be run by cadavers. We got snuff bots. A snuff bot basically is a female or male robotic assassin. We've got and
we had the video where they illustrated that. They said, look, we can, it was a production just to get people concerned about autonomous killing machines that could be used as assassins. They say you could program it for somebody's face, go straight down through the into the halls of Congress and take out whoever you want, just assassinate them by face recognition.
Right. One of the things that I don't think people are taking into account, now this is kind of some of the specific bioweapons and even the programs that were shut down in South Africa, Project Coast and others, and I wrote about this in a book I wrote years ago. It's out of print, but they can genetically type bioweapons to any genetic marker. You got blue eyes, brown eyes, whatever your race is, whatever you're unique, if you're a diabetic. But even beyond that, now imagine this, that the recipient of body fluids, either male or female robots, has a processing lab instantly. And if you're in the database, zap, what do they give you? Enough electricity to kill you or choke you to death? People say, well, that's so far out. It's not far out. It's here now. And that's why that's why transhumanism, the hybrid age, is so critical that people attend. And again, David, it's the biggest thing on the horizon because everything fails. It fails when you understand this. Sure, there'll be wars, nuclear wars, everything's going wild. China's doing this, Russia's doing this, North Korea, we're doing this. And it's insane, in my opinion, that the neocons are provoking World War III. But they have to do that in order to.
It absolutely is insane. And again, you can go to GenSIX.com to find out about that transhumanist conference. You can also go to Steve Quayle to find out more information about Steve Quayle. Technology is something that I have always been interested in. I was an engineer, but we have to be careful about the balance of technology, and we have to understand the sinister forces that are taking control of it.
InfoWars Life Brain Force Plus is our #1 selling product by leaps and bounds, and for a good reason. Going back about 5 years ago, we did research on what top selling nootropics were, what were most popular, what were best, what people liked, and we made it even stronger. Then we cut the price because leading competitors have 5 to 7 times markup. We only have 150%, and then it helps fund our operation. Well, now it's 50% off. That means we've got a 25% markup, and we've got it paired with the Real Red Pill that takes about 7 days to kick in. Brain Force takes about 30 minutes. But the two go together. It's the Mind and Body Challenge. They're both 50% off individually, or together they're 50% off and free shipping with the combo at InfoWarsLife.com. But it's got to end in a couple days because both of these bestsellers are about to sell out. InfoWarsLife.com to get your Brain Force Plus and Real Red Pill today.